I'm obviously on a bike ride, but I thought this would be an appropriate place to talk about solving problems. I worked in an office building where there were 2 elevators, which were always breaking. And they'd send 1 man, then they'd send 2 men, then they'd send 3 men, and they'd have the elevators down. And it just never seemed to get better. And then finally they sent 1 man all by himself. I saw him working on the elevators, and the elevators were closed. We had to use the stairway. So coming into work, I often bought a cup of coffee, and sometimes a cup of coffee for the security guard. This day I bought the coffee for the security guard, but he wasn't there. So I carried it on in, and I saw the elevator man working on the elevator. So I offered him the cup. We got to talking, and over the next couple of days, we got to know each other. He was a specialist. They brought him in when there were problems with elevators that they could not solve. So I asked him what was the secret of him being the top guy or the specialist in the elevator repair business. And he explained to me that what he did was he'd take a look at the elevator and analyze everything, not just the parts that were broken. And then he would take a break. He'd often go back to his hotel, he said, sometimes have a beer, have some dinner, or even go for a swim. And then come back to the elevator in the evening when no one was around that would interrupt him. And he was able to solve the problems with the elevators when other people had difficulty. So this got me to thinking about how people solve problems. And in fact, there's a lot of research on it. The frontal cortex of your brain is a very small part. If it were a golf ball, the rest of your brain would be an Amazon warehouse. And that frontal cortex is where we do our rational problem solving, where you try to fix the elevator. The problem is the frontal cortex is a gas guzzler of glucose and energy. And that is why we can only focus on difficult problem solving for limited periods of time, because we simply get tired. Our brains get tired, our minds get tired. So what the elevator man was doing was he was resting that part of his brain and letting the rest of his brain work on the problem. It comes from relaxing the frontal cortex and letting the rest of the brain do some work. The neuroscientists who have studied this think of it as frequency jumping, and that is you'll go off and do something like go for a swim, and your brain will think about the problem, but it also has to think about swimming. And then it'll think about how cold the water is, and then it'll think about the problem. And it goes back and forth like this. And so your subconscious is actually working on the problem even when you don't think it is. This is where the old sayings of, well, sleep on it, or mull it over, or chew on it, or it will come to you in time. The idea that the subconscious will help you out when your frontal cortex is getting tired or can't figure it out through rational thought. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said about his neighbor, Henry David Thoreau, "The length of his walk uniformly made the length of his writing. If shut up in the house, he did not write at all." So the idea is to get out and let your brain disengage or shut down from the problem for a moment, at least the frontal cortex, and solve the problem through your unconscious thoughts. So how do we do that? First thing is, do something that is mindless and satisfying. The elevator man went for a swim, or he drank a beer and looked at the pool. Avoid input. Don't watch television. Don't do your email. Don't let other input come in. Instead, let your brain sort of daydream and run where it wants to. Play with metaphors sometimes. A broken elevator is like life. A broken elevator is like a bike ride. Whatever those metaphors are that might stir your brain to think in different dimensions. The most important thing is to basically disengage the metaphor. The quote I really love about this is Albert Einstein said when asked about how he came up with E equals mc squared. He says, "I thought of it while I was riding my bicycle. I've got some problems to solve. See you later."